The night was cold and the old human colony stood silent. Rusty metal walls surrounded the place, broken lamps flickered, and the wind carried a strange whisper. At the edge of the colony, near a forgotten storage hall, there was something hidden, something no one wanted to talk about. Inside that hall sat a figure tied to a chair, her head covered with a dirty sack, her hands bound tightly with rope. She was not human, she was the alien widow, the one the people called crazy. They said she had lost her mind after her husband died. They said she screamed nonsense, they said she was dangerous. But the truth was not so simple. The guards outside the hall laughed at her suffering. "Don't listen to her, she's crazy," they always told the curious. Anyone who asked questions was silenced quickly. The colony leaders made sure no one believed the widow. To them, she was a problem that had been locked away. To them, she was not a person anymore, only a warning. But whispers spread through the colony. Whispers that maybe she knew something terrible, something that could end them all. Inside the hall, the widow sat in the dark, her breathing weak, her body thin from hunger. Her alien skin had lost its shine. Her bones showed under the surface, still her voice carried power. Muffled by the sack but heavy with meaning, every night she tried to speak, words crawling out from under the rough cloth. "Listen, listen to me. He tried to save you. They killed him," she whispered, but no one wanted to listen. No one wanted to believe a young soldier named Mark was passing by that night. He had heard the stories, he had heard the laughter. He had heard the warnings still. Something pulled him closer to the hall. He stopped by the door, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling rising inside him. Through the cracks of the door, he could hear her faint voice. His heart beat faster, his hand shook. Why was he even listening, he asked himself. He knew the punishment for helping her was death. But her words crawled into his mind, refusing to leave. The colony itself felt strange that night. The air was heavy. The ground was trembling slightly. Though the guards told people it was only wind, Mark knew it was not just wind. He felt it under his boots, he felt it in his bones. And then her voice came again, weak but sharp. Cutting through the silence, "They buried the truth. They buried him. They buried it under your feet." Mark's breath caught in his chest. He stepped back, afraid. What was she talking about? Who did they bury? And what was it? The widow moved her head, the sack shifting slightly. Her voice rose, cracking but desperate. They killed him because he knew. He knew the danger. He tried to warn them, but they called him a traitor. "They called me mad, and now you will all die. Unless you listen." Mark felt sweat on his forehead. His hands clenched into fists. She was supposed to be insane, but her words were too clear, too sharp. They carried weight, like they were pulled from the deep core of truth. And deep inside, Mark felt fear, not of her, but of the possibility she was right. The guards at the far end of the street shouted and laughed, throwing dice on the ground, not caring about the prisoner inside. To them, she was forgotten, a ghost locked in chains, but to Mark, she was no longer just a story, no longer just a warning. She was a mystery, one that burned in his chest like fire. The sack moved again as she struggled for breath. Her words came softer now, almost breaking. "Find the truth before it wakes." Mark stepped away quickly, his mind spinning. What truth, what danger, what secret was buried under their feet? He could not sleep that night. He could not shake the sound of her voice. Her words echoed in his head, louder than the laughter of the guards, louder than the orders of his commanders. The colony slept in silence, but Mark knew something was wrong. Something was moving under the ground, something was waiting, and only the widow seemed to know what it was. The next morning, the colony leaders stood before the people. They spoke with strong voices, saying everything was fine, saying the tremors were nothing. They told the people to work harder, to obey, to stop listening to lies. They pointed to the hall where the widow was kept. And they laughed. "She is a broken thing. Her words are poison. Do not listen. Do not pity her. She's already dead." The people nodded, afraid, too afraid to question. But Mark's eyes found the hall again, and his fists tightened. He could not shake the sound of her voice, the weight of her warning. That night he returned to the hall. Alone, his breath shallow, his steps heavy, he pushed the door slowly, and the wood creaked like a scream. The widow lifted her head. As if she had been waiting, the sack hit her face, but her voice came strong this time. "You came back. You came to listen." Mark froze in fear, yet his hand reached forward. Slowly, carefully, he touched the rope, then the sack. He knew once he pulled it away, nothing would be the same again. because deep inside he already believed her, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. Mark's hand shook as he pulled the sack from the widow's head. The rough cloth slipped to the floor and the dim light revealed her face. She was weak, her alien skin pale and cracked, her eyes sunken but burning with a strange fire. Her lips trembled, yet when she spoke, her voice carried more strength than her broken body suggested. "You should not be here," she whispered. Her voice raw from thirst. "They will kill you if they see you. They will call you a traitor like they did to him." Her eyes fixed on him, sharp, unblinking, filled with both pain and fury. Mark swallowed hard, his breath heavy, his heart pounding like a drum inside his chest. Who was he?" Mark asked in a low voice, though he was afraid of the answer. The widow lifted her head slowly, her neck stiff from the rope that had bound her for so long. "My husband," she said, the word rolling from her tongue like a broken prayer. "He wanted peace, he wanted truth. He believed humans and my kind could live together. But your leaders feared him, so they silenced him." Her eyes glistened with tears that refused to fall, her jaw trembling as the memory burned through her. "They killed him and they laughed. They called me insane. They told your people I was filled with lies, but I saw everything." "I know what they did." Mark stepped back, the cold air cutting his lungs. Every word she spoke clashed against everything he had been taught. He had grown up hearing stories of alien betrayal, of dangerous creatures who lied, yet here, in front of him, was not a monster, not a liar, but a widow whose grief was too heavy to be false. Still, he struggled to believe, because believing her meant everything he knew was a lie. The widow leaned closer, the ropes tightening around her arms as she pulled forward. "They buried him under the ground," she whispered, her eyes wide with anger and sorrow. Not because they honored him, not because they cared, but because he had found something. He had found the truth. Mark froze, his body stiff as stone. "What truth?" he asked, his voice breaking. The widow's lips curled in pain, as if speaking the words cost her more strength than she had left. "He found the old machine," she said, her voice trembling. "A thing that does not belong to my kind, and does not belong to yours. It was left by something older, something that sleeps beneath this soil." Her eyes locked onto his, desperate, begging him to believe. "He tried to warn your leaders, but they would not listen. They wanted to use it, they wanted power, but they do not understand. If it wakes, it will not serve them. It will not serve anyone. It will destroy all." Mark's head spun, his thoughts colliding with fear. The ground shook again, a faint tremor that rattled the walls. The guards outside cursed, kicking the dirt, calling it nothing more than shifting earth. But Mark knew better. He felt the vibration crawl up his legs, through his chest into his bones. And then he remembered her words from the night before. "Find the truth before it wakes." The widow closed her eyes, her voice softer now. "My husband's blood is on their hands. They told you he was a traitor, but he was a protector. He died trying to save you." Her voice broke, the sound of grief echoing through the empty hall. "I was his witness, I was his proof, and that is why they covered my head, tied me down, called me mad. Because truth is more dangerous than any weapon." Mark felt his throat tighten, his fists clench. Everything she said lit fire inside him. If she was lying, she was the best liar he had ever heard. But if she was telling the truth, then his people were sitting on the edge of disaster. Blind and deaf by choice, he thought of the colony leaders, their speeches, their laughter, their smiles as they told people not to listen. He thought of the guards outside playing games, spitting on the ground, ignoring the tremors that grew stronger every day. And then he thought of the widow, starving in chains, carrying a truth no one wanted to hear. Her eyes found his again, sharp as knives. "You feel it, don't you?" she said, her words crawling into his chest. "You felt the ground last night, you hear it even now. It is not the wind. It is not the earth, it is the machine. It stirs, it hungers, and soon it will wake." Mark's lips parted, but no words came. He felt the tremor again, stronger this time, shaking the lamp on the wall until it flickered. The widow's voice rose, filled with desperation. "Do not ignore it like they did. Do not laugh like they did. Help me, free me. And maybe we can stop it." Mark's heart pounded. His mind racing, he knew the danger of believing her. He knew the punishment, but something deep inside told him she was not insane. She was not lying, and for the first time, he felt the shadow of doubt toward the very leaders he had sworn to serve. The widow leaned back, her strength fading, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They said I was crazy because they were afraid. They were afraid of truth. They were afraid of him, and they are afraid of me, but fear cannot stop what is coming. She lowered her head, closing her eyes, her breath shallow. Remember my words, soldier. Remember them when the ground splits open. Remember them when the sky turns black. Only truth can save you. Mark stepped back into the shadows, his chest heavy. Outside, the guards laughed again, careless, blind. But Mark could no longer laugh, he could no longer pretend. He had heard the widow's secret, and it had planted a seed inside his heart. A seed of fear, a seed of anger, a seed of dangerous belief. And once a seed is planted, it only grows. Mark walked back to his quarters with heavy steps, his mind a storm. The widow's words burned inside him, louder than the speeches of his commanders, louder than the laughter of the guards. He wanted to ignore them, he wanted to sleep and forget. But the ground itself betrayed his denial. The tremors came again that night, small but steady, like a heartbeat rising from the earth. It was not the wind, it was not the shifting soil. It was something deeper, something alive. When morning came, the colony leaders stood on the platform in the square. Their voices rang out, proud and strong, telling the people everything was fine. They spoke of progress, of safety, of human strength. They laughed at whispers of danger, pointing to the widow as an example of madness. "She is proof of alien lies," one leader shouted, his voice sharp. "She speaks poison, she is broken. She is not to be trusted, we have locked her away for your safety." The crowd nodded, afraid to show doubt, afraid to be seen as weak. But Mark's eyes lingered on their faces, and he saw the fear behind their smiles. Later that day, he patrolled the outer edge of the colony. The air was thick, the soil cracked and dry, and the sound of distant groaning rose from beneath the ground. Mark pressed his boot to the dirt and felt the pulse again, slow but steady. The widow's words returned to him, echoing in his chest. It stirs, it hungers, and soon it will wake. That night, against his own fear, Mark returned to the hall. The widow sat in the dark, her body weak, but her eyes alive with fire. He knelt beside her and whispered, "Tell me what it is. Tell me what sleeps under our feet." The widow's breath rattled, her voice a sharp whisper. "It is not mine, and it is not yours. It is older than both, older than this planet, older than the stars you claim. My husband found it, buried deep. Covered by rock and time, he tried to warn your people, but they silenced him." Mark clenched his fists, his chest tight. "What is it?" he asked again, desperate. The widow lifted her head slowly, her lips curling with pain. "A machine," she said, "a machine that tests. It was built by those who came before us. A weapon, but not in the way you think. It does not kill with bullets. It kills with lies, it kills with betrayal. It feeds on division, and when it grows strong enough, it awakens." Mark stepped back, his breath stolen from him. He thought of the leaders calling her mad. He thought of the way they silenced anyone who doubted. He thought of the laughter, the fear, the chains the machine fed on lies, and the colony was drowning in them. The widow leaned closer, her voice trembling. "They think they control it, they think they can use it. But no one controls it, no one uses it, it only uses you." The ground shook harder this time. The walls rattled, dust fell from the ceiling. The guards outside cursed again, pretending it was nothing, pretending it was harmless, but Mark's heart knew. The widow's words had weight. They carried the sound of truth. He pressed his hand to the rope around her wrists, his fingers itching to free her. But fear held him back, the fear of being caught, the fear of being branded a traitor. Still his soul screamed at him, telling him he could not ignore this. "Not anymore." The widow's eyes softened, her voice lower now. "You are not blind, soldier. You see what they refuse to see. You hear what they refuse to hear. The choice will soon be yours, and your choice will decide more than your life. It will decide the fate of your people." Mark's chest tightened, his mouth dry. He wanted to deny it, but the tremors made denial impossible. That night he wandered the colony streets. He saw mothers holding their children, workers returning tired and broken, old men staring at the sky. All of them trusted the leaders. All of them believed the lies because belief was easier than fear. But if the widow was right, their trust was leading them to death. Mark felt the weight of their lives pressing on his shoulders, a burden he had never asked for, and yet somehow it had found him. The next day, Mark was called to guard duty near the command hall. He heard the leaders inside, their voices sharp, arguing. One of them shouted, "The tremors grow stronger." "The people are restless," another answered. "Do not speak of it, do not spread fear. The machine is not our enemy. It will give us power if we claim it first." Mark's blood turned cold. The widow had been right, they all knew. And still they chose lies. Still they chose silence. That evening, Mark returned to the widow once more, his decision heavier now. Her head lifted when she heard his steps. Her eyes searching his. You heard them? Didn't you? She whispered, her lips trembling. Mark nodded, his chest burning. They know, he said, his voice shaking. They know it's real. And they don't care. The widow's eyes filled with sorrow, but also with hope. Then you must care, she said softly, because when truth is buried, someone must dig it out. Even if it costs them everything. The ground shook again, harder than before, making the lamp sway and the walls groan. Mark steadied himself, his eyes locked on the widow. For the first time, he did not see a prisoner. He did not see a madwoman. He saw a torch burning in the dark, a voice of truth in a world of lies. And though fear gripped him, another feeling grew stronger inside him. A dangerous feeling, a human feeling, the feeling that he could no longer obey the silence. The feeling that he would stand against the hidden enemy. No matter the cost, Mark sat alone in his quarters, his hands shaking as he removed his helmet. The words of the widow echoed in his ears, louder than the speeches of his commanders, louder than the noise of the colony outside. She is mad, the leaders had said. Do not listen to her. Do not pity her. But Mark had listened, and now her voice was inside him like a fire that would not burn out. The ground trembled again, small at first, then stronger, shaking the glass on his table. Mark pressed his hand to the wall and felt the pulse of the earth. Steady, alive, growing. He knew this was no storm. No shifting soil, no harmless quake. It was the machine. The hidden enemy the widow had spoken of. And every time it stirred, it seemed to grow stronger. Hungrier, closer that night. Mark could not sleep. He stared at the ceiling, his heart heavy with fear and guilt. The widow's words tore at him. You must care, soldier, because when truth is buried, someone must dig it out. He wanted to believe he was only one man, too small to change anything. But deep inside, he knew the truth. One man could be enough. One choice could be enough. The next morning, the leaders spoke again in the square. They told the people to stay calm, to work harder, to trust in them. They laughed about the tremors, calling them nothing. They mocked anyone who whispered otherwise. And once more they reminded the crowd of the widow. She is the enemy, she is broken, she lies to confuse you. The people nodded, afraid, repeating the words like a prayer. But Mark saw their eyes, and he saw doubt beginning to grow. After the speech, Mark walked away, his fists tight, his mind spinning. He passed the storage hall where the widow was kept, and he felt the pull again. He pushed the door open slowly, and the dim light fell on her thin, broken figure, her head lifted, her eyes searching, and her lips curved in a weak smile. You came back, she whispered, her voice cracked. I knew you would. Mark knelt beside her, his hands trembling. I heard them, he said, his voice low. I heard the leaders, they knew all along. The widow closed her eyes, pain cutting across her face. Yes, she said softly. They knew, and they chose lies because lies are easier than truth. But lies will not stop what comes. Her eyes opened again, sharp and bright despite her weakness. Free me, soldier. Free me, and I will show you what must be done. Mark's breath caught in his chest. The ropes were right there, frayed and old, easy to cut. He could do it. He could set her free with one movement of his knife. But fear clawed at him. If he freed her, he would be a traitor. If he freed her, his own people would turn against him. If he freed her, he might be hunted, tortured, killed, and yet if he did not, the machine would awaken and all would be lost. The tremor came again, stronger this time, rattling the beams of the hall. Dust fell from the ceiling, the lamp flickered. The widow's voice rose, firm and desperate. You feel it, don't you? You know I speak the truth. Every second wasted brings the end closer. Mark's heart pounded in his chest, his fingers gripping the hilt of his knife. He looked at her, chained, starving, broken but unyielding, and he knew he could not walk away again. He cut the rope, the blade slicing clean. The widow gasped, her hands free at last, trembling as she rubbed her wrists. Tears filled her eyes, though she did not weep. You chose truth, she whispered, her voice both relief and sorrow. Mark's throat tightened, his decision heavy. There is no turning back now, he said. The widow nodded, her face solemn. There was never any turning back, only forward. That night, Mark smuggled her out of the hall under the cover of shadows. They moved through the narrow alleys. Hiding from the patrols, every corner carried danger. Every sound of boots on the ground could mean death. But Mark's resolve was stronger than fear. The widow walked beside him, weak but determined, her eyes burning like coals in the dark. "You are different," she whispered. "You see what others cannot. You are willing to act when others bow. That is why I trusted you." They reached the edge of the colony, where the walls cracked and the soil split from the tremors. Mark stopped, his chest heavy, his mind torn. "This is madness," he muttered. "They will come for us. They will kill us both." The widow placed her hand on his arm, her touch light but steady. "They will kill us if we stay. They will kill us if we run. But if we reach the machine before it wakes, we have a chance." Her words sank into him, sharp as steel, and though fear still clawed at his chest, hope began to grow beside it. Behind them, the colony bells rang. The guards had noticed her absence, voices shouted in the night. Boots thundered against the ground. The chase had begun. Mark gritted his teeth, pulling the widow forward. "There is no turning back now," he whispered again. This time not in fear, but in resolve. The ground shook harder, as if the machine itself knew she had been freed. The air filled with a low hum, rising from the earth like a warning. Mark and the widow ran into the darkness, hunted by their own people, but for the first time, they were not running away from truth, they were running toward it. The night was restless as Mark and the widow moved through the broken lands outside the colony. The ground beneath them shook again and again, each tremor stronger than the last. It felt as if something buried deep below was struggling to break free. Mark gripped his rifle tightly, but no weapon felt strong enough against something unseen. The widow's steps were slow from hunger, yet her eyes carried a fire that gave her strength. "They will not stop," she whispered as they walked. "Your leaders will chase us, but the true danger does not wear a uniform. The true danger is waking." Mark nodded, his jaw tight, his heart heavy. Behind them, in the distance, torches flickered as soldiers searched, voices echoing in the night. Mark knew it was only a matter of time before they were found, but for now the dark gave them cover, and the broken ground gave them a path the soldiers feared to follow. As they climbed a ridge, the widow stopped and placed her hand against the soil. She closed her eyes, listening, feeling. Mark stood beside her, uneasy. "What do you hear?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The widow opened her eyes slowly, fear flashing in them. "It is awake," she said, her tone low and final. "The machine is no longer sleeping. It is rising." The ground roared beneath them, shaking violently. Rocks tumbled from the ridge. Cracks tore across the earth, and a low hum filled the air. Mark stumbled but grabbed her arm to steady her. The widow looked at him with urgency, her voice sharp. "We are running out of time, soldier. We must reach it before they do." Before it takes what it wants, they hurried down the ridge, moving toward the deep canyon where the widow's husband had once worked. Mark remembered her words about his death, about how he had been silenced. And now, with every step closer to the canyon, Mark felt the truth pressing down on him like a weight. Her husband had died to stop this, and if Mark failed, his own people would meet the same fate. When they reached the canyon's edge, Mark froze. The ground below was glowing faintly, threads of strange light weaving through the cracks. The air vibrated with a hum that made his teeth ache. The widow's eyes widened with sorrow and awe. "It has begun," she whispered. "It is feeding." Mark stared down at the glowing soil, confusion tearing at his mind. "Feeding on what?" he asked, his voice shaking. The widow looked at him, her face grim. "On lies, on betrayal, on the hatred between your kind and mine. Every word of denial, every silence, every false promise gives it strength." Mark felt his chest tighten, the truth cutting him deeper than any blade. His leaders had been feeding it all along, and none of them even understood what they were doing. Suddenly, a siren rang from the colony behind them. Mark turned and saw lights spreading across the land, soldiers moving in lines toward the canyon. The widow grabbed his arm, her grip firm despite her weakness. "They are coming. They think they can control it. But they will only awaken it faster. We must stop them." Mark's heart raced, fear clawing at his chest. He had fought men before, but this was different. This was a battle not only against soldiers but against the earth itself. The canyon floor split open with a violent crack. A column of light shot into the sky. Blinding, searing, Mark shielded his eyes, his ears ringing from the roar. When he looked again, he saw enormous shapes moving beneath the surface. Not machines built by human or alien hands, but something ancient, something alive in its own way. The widow fell to her knees, her voice trembling. "It is here, it is awake." "We are too late," Mark grabbed her, pulling her back onto her feet. "No, not too late," he said, his voice fierce. "Tell me what to do, tell me how to fight it." The widow's eyes filled with both hope and despair. "We cannot fight it with weapons, soldier. Bullets and fire will only make it stronger. It must be faced with truth, with unity, with courage to break the lies it feeds on." Mark's chest tightened, his hands shaking. How could he convince anyone of that? How could he fight lies with truth when his own people were blind and deaf? The ground shook again, stronger, throwing them to the dirt. Behind them, the soldiers shouted, their voices filled with panic. Some fired their rifles into the glowing cracks, the bullets disappearing into the light. Others fell back in terror as the earth swallowed their shots. Mark watched in horror as the machine answered with a blast of sound, a scream that split the air. Several soldiers collapsed, clutching their heads. Blood running from their ears, the widow grabbed Mark's arm, pulling him away from the sight. "Do you see now?" she cried. "It cannot be killed by force. It can only be silenced by truth." Mark's mind spun as the screams of soldiers echoed through the canyon. He saw their faces twisted with fear, men who had once laughed at the widow now begging for mercy. He turned back to her, his jaw tight. "Then we show them," he said. "We show them all what is happening. We make them listen." The widow nodded slowly, her lips trembling. "Yes, but they will not believe easily. They will cling to the lies until the lies choke them." The ground shook again and another crack split the soil. From the depths a surge of light tore upward, shaping itself into towering forms like shadows made of fire. The air burned with heat and noise. The machine's hunger clear, Mark pulled the widow back, determination flashing in his eyes. "We cannot let them control the story anymore," he said, his voice steady. "If the machine feeds on lies, then we cut off its food, we tell the truth. Even if it kills us." The widow looked at him, her eyes wet with grief but also with pride. "You are not like the others," she whispered. "You carry the strength of a man who can change the fate of all." Behind them, the soldiers screamed and fired. The leader shouted orders, the machine roared. But Mark's heart was set, his choice already made. They would not hide anymore. They would not bury the truth. The awakening had begun, and the only way to survive was to face it. The canyon burned with light as the machine roared from beneath the earth. Its voice was not words, but a sound that tore through bone and soul. Men dropped their weapons, clutching their ears, while others fired blindly into the glowing cracks. Every bullet vanished into the light, swallowed like nothing, as if the earth itself mocked their fear. Mark pulled the widow behind a jagged wall of stone. Her chest heaved, her skin pale and cracked, but her eyes still burned with fire. "This is what I warned them," she whispered. "This is the hunger of the machine. It feeds on their fear, on their denial. Every shot they fire gives it more." Mark peeked out, his jaw clenched, his heart pounding. The soldiers were collapsing in panic, their leaders shouting orders no one could follow. It was chaos, it was madness, and the machine grew stronger with every passing second. Mark turned back to the widow, desperation cutting into his voice. "Tell me what to do. How do we stop it?" The widow's eyes locked on his, sharp as blades. "You cannot stop it with steel. You cannot stop it with fire. It must be faced with truth, soldier. Only truth can starve it." Mark's mind spun, his body shaking. How could he spread truth when no one listened? When the people had been told for so long that she was mad? Yet as he looked at the terrified faces of his fellow soldiers, he saw something new. Their eyes were no longer filled with laughter or mockery. They were filled with doubt, with cracks breaking through the wall of lies. Mark rose from cover, his voice tearing through the noise. "Stop firing," he shouted. "You're feeding it. You're making it stronger." But his voice was drowned by the screams and the roar of the machine. No one listened, no one could hear. The widow stepped forward, her voice rising like thunder despite her weakness. "They killed him," she cried. "They killed the only one who tried to warn you. And now you will all die unless you hear me." The soldiers froze, some lowering their rifles, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. They knew her voice, they knew her face. They had been told she was insane, but now, as the ground split wider and the light grew brighter, her words felt less like madness and more like prophecy. One man shouted, "She lies! She's tricking us," but his voice trembled with doubt. Another whispered, "What if she's right?" And his weapon slipped from his hands. Mark stepped beside her, his chest burning with courage. "She is not lying," he shouted. "I heard your leaders, they knew about this. They kept it hidden. They let it grow. They laughed while it fed, and now it is awake. The soldiers turned their eyes to him, torn between fear and disbelief. They called her crazy, Mark said, his voice fierce. But the only crazy thing is ignoring the truth when it is right in front of us. The machine roared again, a wave of energy sweeping through the canyon. Men fell to the ground screaming, their voices twisted with pain. Mark grabbed the widow's hand, pulling her forward into the open. If they were to die, they would die speaking the truth, not hiding from it. The widow raised her voice once more, her words cutting through the chaos. This machine does not serve you. It does not serve me, it serves only itself. And it feeds on lies, it feeds on silence, it feeds on your leader's betrayal. But it can starve if you stop giving it what it wants. The soldiers looked at one another, their hands shaking, their rifles lowering. Some turned their eyes back to the leaders on the ridge. The leaders shouted for control, their faces pale with fear, their voices desperate. Do not listen to them, they are traitors. They are liars, they screamed. But the ground shook violently, and the machine answered with another roar, louder, fiercer, and the people began to see who the true liars were. Mark's voice rose again, raw with fire. They told us she was mad because they were afraid of what she knew. They told us to ignore her while they buried the truth. But you can feel it now. You can see it with your own eyes. Do not let them bury you too. The widow's eyes filled with tears, but her voice did not break. My husband died to stop this. He gave his life for you. Will you let his sacrifice mean nothing? Silence fell for a heartbeat, heavy, painful. Then one soldier dropped his rifle to the ground. Then another, then another. The sound of weapons falling echoed like thunder across the canyon. The leaders screamed in rage, calling them weak, calling them fools. But their voices were drowned by the roar of the earth. The machine's light flared brighter. But this time it seemed unsteady. The widow gripped Mark's hand, whispering fiercely, "Do you see it is starving? It cannot feed when the truth is spoken. When lies are broken, it weakens." Mark's heart surged with hope, his voice rising louder than ever. Then we keep speaking, we keep showing them. We don't stop until it falls silent. The ground shook again, the machine roaring in anger. But now the soldiers shouted with Mark, their voices rising. They repeated the widow's words. They cursed the lies of their leaders. The machine trembled, its light flickering, its roar breaking. It was not gone, not yet, but it was weakening for the first time. The truth was louder than the lies, and in that moment, as the canyon burned with fading light, Mark realized this was not just a fight for survival. It was a battle for the soul of humanity itself, a battle to prove that humans could rise above fear, above denial, above betrayal. And though the machine still roared, its hunger was no longer endless, because truth had been spoken and truth had teeth. The canyon trembled like a wounded beast. The light that had once burned like fire now flickered weakly. The machine roared again, but its voice was no longer steady. No longer endless, it was a broken sound. A cry of hunger denied. A scream of power fading. Mark stood tall, his chest heaving, his throat raw from shouting. Beside him, the widow leaned against the jagged stone, her body weak but her spirit blazing all around them. Soldiers who once mocked her now stood in silence, their weapons abandoned, their eyes wide with fear and wonder. The leaders still shouted from the ridge, their voices desperate. "Do not listen, they are liars. They are traitors," they cried. But their words carried no weight anymore. The soldiers had seen too much, felt too much, and the machine itself had revealed the truth louder than any speech could. The ground split wider, and a column of burning light burst into the sky. Figures formed in the glow, shifting, towering, shadows that looked like giants of fire. They moved without form, without flesh, their shapes bending like smoke yet solid like iron. The machine was showing itself, no longer hiding. The widow gripped Mark's arm, her voice sharp. "This is its last strength, its final fury. If we falter now, it will consume everything." Mark swallowed hard, his body shaking but his heart steady. He turned to the soldiers, his voice fierce. "Do not fear it, do not obey it, do not believe the lies of those who fed it. We stand together, we speak the truth, and we break its power." The soldiers looked at one another, doubt still in their eyes. But then one man shouted, "He is right," and another cried, "She was never mad." The words spread like fire, voices rising in defiance, and the machine roared, as if struck by blades sharper than steel. The leaders on the ridge saw their control slipping away. their faces pale, their bodies trembling. They screamed orders, but no one listened. The people had turned, their faith broken. Their eyes finally open. One leader tried to run, but the ground cracked beneath him, swallowing him into the light. The others fell to their knees, their power gone, their lies shattered. The widow stepped forward, her eyes locked on the glowing canyon. Her voice rose above the chaos, steady and strong. "You cannot feed on us anymore, machine. You cannot drink from our silence. You cannot grow from our fear. We deny you, we defy you. We end you." The machine shook, its fire dimming, its shapes twisting in pain. Mark joined her, his voice a roar. "You lied to us, you tricked us, but no more. We are human. And we choose truth," the soldiers echoed him, their voices thunder. The canyon became a storm of human defiance. Every word a weapon, every shout a strike. The machine staggered, its towering forms breaking apart, its roar splintering into fragments. It thrashed against the earth, desperate, starving. But truth poured into the air like a river, unstoppable, unending, and with every word, every voice, the machine's light faded further. At last, with a final roar, the ground shuddered violently. A shockwave burst outward, knocking men to the ground, tearing dust into the air. Then silence, heavy, endless. When the dust settled, the canyon was still. The glow gone, the cracks sealed. The machine had fallen back into the dark. Broken, beaten, starved, Mark rose to his feet slowly, his body aching, his ears ringing. The widow stood beside him, her breath shallow, her face pale but radiant with victory. The soldiers stared at the ground where the light had been, their weapons forgotten, their hearts trembling. The leaders lay silent on the ridge, their voices gone, their power ended. Mark looked at the widow, his voice soft but steady. "It is over," he said. The widow nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "For now," she whispered. "But remember, soldier, lies will always grow again if left unchecked. The machine may sleep, but it will always hunger. Only truth keeps it weak." Mark turned back to the soldiers. To the people who had once called her mad, he raised his voice clear and strong. "She told the truth, and we tried to bury her. We laughed at her, we chained her, but she saved us. Not with weapons, not with power, but with words we refused to hear." The crowd bowed their heads, shame heavy on their shoulders, but in their silence, there was also respect and a new strength. The widow stood taller, no longer hidden, no longer silenced. Her chains were gone, her sack was gone, her voice was free. She was not the mad woman they had mocked. She was not the ghost they had feared. She was proof that truth survives even when buried, proof that lies cannot win forever. She was the alien widow who had carried hope when all others chose denial. And beside her stood Mark, a soldier who had chosen to listen when no one else would. Together they had faced the machine. Together they had broken the lies. The people would remember this day, not as the day the machine woke, but as the day humanity rose, not with steel, not with fire, but with truth. The night grew quiet, the stars shining above the broken canyon. The machine was silent, the colony was changed, and in that silence hope grew. Hope that humans could rise above their fear, hope that truth could guide them, hope that when the next test came, they would not need chains or sacks or silence, because they had learned that humanity is strongest not when it denies, but when it listens. And in the shadows of the canyon, the widow lifted her head to the sky, her voice soft but unbroken. He died to save them, but they lived to prove him right. Mark stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The final stand was over, but the story of truth had only just begun.